Is Donald Trump running for president in 2024? And if so, what is his chances to win? Join us today, guys, as we go through the list of the 2024 presidential candidates, give you their odds, and give you our personal picks for president. Welcome to your Political Perch. Hey, guys, and welcome to the Political Perch Podcast, a bi weekly podcast that talks about current events, politics, presidents, history, and anything that is plaguing the United States of America. Join us. Hey guys, welcome back to another week of the Political Perch Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Andy, joined by
Ashton.
And today, guys, we're going to have a kind of fun podcast where we're going to go through all of the 2024 presidential candidates, both Republican, Democrat, and a kind of a category that I like to call the oddballs. And it's just going to be fun to see what the kind of sports betting world thinks are their odds to win on top of our personal odds and our personal choices, who we think should run and who we want to see run. Ashton, are you as excited about this as I am?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be an interesting primary season in 4 years, and it's gonna be kind of fun just from a political theater perspective. What happens?
100% Ashton. Before we're going to kick off this list of just the odds themselves, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way, and that is the rerunning of Joe Biden or the other running of Donald Trump in 2024. Ashton, do you give any validity to Trump running in 2024? Do you like his chances? And then also with Joe Biden, do you think he will run again, with his age being as high as it will be in 4 years?
So first off, I'll say it'll be interesting to hear what you say. Me and you haven't really talked about this, so this is why I like doing this podcast. Sometimes we get to talk about stuff we haven't talked about before, and me and you are blabbermouths, and we like to put our opinions out there. As regards to the two, if you want to say favorites, if they both run clearly, if either one runs, they're gonna most likely win their nomination decently easy. I'll say this. I think it's more likely Joe Biden runs again than it is Trump. Um, but both, I wouldn't. I personally don't think either is gonna be running. I would put it at like a 10% chance, maybe 15% chance Biden runs. I think in percentages, guys. So this is just my head. I'll put it at 15% chance Biden runs again and is able to win the nomination, and probably a 5% chance for Trump.
I'm actually going to flip your answer there, Ashton. I think Donald Trump is the more likely to run in 2024 again. If you kind of look at some of the inside sources you're seeing from the White House, it feels like Trump knows he's losing and is just trying to play the I won a fraud card to try to set up a possibility of a 2024 run, which I could see happening. I think he has a better chance to win said election than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden's going to be in his 80s at that point. If he, no offense, I'm not trying to be all dark and mean like that. If Joe Biden even makes it through his presidency, he's a very healthy man right now, but a lot can change in a year or even a couple months. We've seen that with COVID, but with any kind of sickness, it can change instantly when you're that in that age group. But I do give Biden, like, if he, like you said, if he runs, it's probably going to be like a 10% chance overall. But I give Trump like a
Hmm.
15% chance. But still, it's very unlikely that either one of these candidates will run and win at this the kind of the combination of both of those happening. But those possibilities are out there because Joe Biden's going to be the incumbent, and you never can count out Donald Trump. We've known that for these past 4 years.
Hmm. I will say, Andy, to back up your point, or to kind of add my 2 cents to your point, you have to remember Joe Biden did lose his fastball a little bit. Donald Trump would be entering those same years, starting to get to the point where he's possibly losing his fastball. And, Andy, I don't know how good Wi Fi service is in jail, but it's going to be kind of hard to tweet and hold rallies in I don't know, a jail kitchen. Um, uh, Here's the thing. me and you have debated this for a while, and even 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 I have said for a while that, I thought Trump broke a good amount of laws, but I was on the side of pardoning him federally and even on the. I started before the election lean towards him getting a pardon on the state level too, because generally I think that would rip this country apart. I don't think it does any good looking back through history and just kind of opening that old wound. The election's over, his presidency's over. Let's kind of move past from that. Everything he's done after election has been horrendous, and it's now looking to the point where I think he has serious legal jeopardy. And can he make 4 years without, you know, I don't know. This is a guy who had to close his charity because it was so corrupt. Same guy who was forced to close his university because it was basically handing out worthless pieces of paper that weren't actually degrees. I mean, thing after thing has been shut down because it was just either corrupt, lackluster, or both. And I just don't see Trump ending in 4 years in good enough health, on top of not having enough legal jeopardy to really even focus on running a campaign. So that's my 2 cents. You know, I wasn't the most correct when it comes to general election. I'll admit that. Part of going through life is learning your mistakes and where you missed and where you didn't miss. And I didn't miss in the general, or I missed in general election. I didn't miss in the primary. I was pretty spot on. Andy, I even went back and looked at a post I did in 2019 in March of 2019. It was March or May. And I did the primary almost to a T. I said that Buttigieg was going to win Iowa. I thought he was going to go on to win New Hampshire, and then it would end up being Buttigieg and Biden going blow for the rest of the primary, with Biden ending up winning. Of course, he won Iowa, but not in the way I thought he was going to, and that wasn't his fault. That was just kind of how the caucus was just a entire catastrophe, and that blew his momentum. And I honestly believe he would have won New Hampshire if it wasn't for that. If he would have just got declared the winner that night of Iowa, he would have went on to win New Hampshire, and that would have made Super Tuesday a lot more competitive for those two. And um who knows how the primary ends up then, but I really think it would have been Biden versus Buttigieg going blow for blow. But in general, I was decently or really correct about the primary. I think, out of the 20 states we predicted in the primary before Biden basically won it all, I got like 16 out of the 20 first states. So, um, I'm better at predicting primaries, apparently, Andy, than I am general elections.
Yeah, Ashton. But speaking about Pete Buttigieg, that kind of helps us move on to our next category, and that is going to the candidates themselves. Let's start with the oddball category that I like to call it, the ones that really they might have a small chance, but really they're just there for show, kind of the pageantry of it. You have the list that starts with everyone's favorite Dwayne Johnson, who's at like a 25-1 chance. You have Kanye West after his, should we even call it candidacy in this 2020 cycle? He's up there. Tucker Carlson's actually pretty high on the list with 33-1. Technically, he's a Republican, but I'm considering him an oddball because he's not there for really to fix the country. He's there for his own show, for his own money aspect. I think Ben Shapiro could be in this category. Bill Gates with his money, along with like Mark Cuban. You can kind of get Bloomberg in that category, but technically he's a Democrat. But Ashton, out of these oddballs, do any of these really have a shot, or will they just be name recognition alone?
Um, the only two I take a realistic uh realistic view of winning if you want to call it that, or having a chance at winning, would probably, in my opinion, be Tucker Carlson and The Rock, both in a different primary, The Rock in Democratic primary and Tucker Carlson in the Republican. Just because Tucker does have somewhat of a charisma, he has more charisma than Ben Shapiro. He also is a little bit, I don't want to say smarter, but more within that populist wheelhouse and has been a lot longer than Ben Shapiro. So don't get me started on Ben Shapiro. I can't stand him, but he is a smart person. He just doesn't have as much charisma as Tucker Carlson. And The Rock, no one can deny he has charisma. The question is, can he have developed platform and can he kind of, I don't know, put together a campaign? That's the biggest problem with these type of self-starter campaigns. They typically aren't good and they fizzle out and they don't know how to actually operate a realistic campaign. But if he can get one together, I think he would have a real shot just off of his charisma alone. Donald Trump showed you don't need to necessarily have a standard campaign to win if you have a lot of charisma and you know how to use it effectively. That doesn't happen for most people. Trump is the exception, not the rule so far. So that's why I would put Rock a little bit less than some, standard political types.
I have to agree with you, Ashton. Both those picks, I think, have, I wouldn't say a real shot, but if they would, out of any of these oddballs, they would be the ones. Tucker Carlson, like you said, really speaks to that very conservative right wing kind of leg of this country. The 45% of this country. I think he's got enough charisma to swing a couple more, especially in the primary. I don't know so much about the election process, depending on who he's facing, of course, but you look at, so we're using for some of these odds, we're using it's United Kingdom based sport betting, casino betting, stuff like that. It's called Coral, sports.coral. Go look that up if you guys want to, fact check us on this stuff. But they give Tucker Carlson right now a 16-1 chance to win the Republican primary, which gives him a decent shot. And you're like, well, that doesn't sound too high. But you look at some of the people also that would be in that Republican kind of nominee, that kind of Republican primary, and he's at 33-1, not 33-1, 16-1. He's tied with people like Tom Cotton, Ivanka Trump, and Ted Cruz in that same category. So he's not, according to them, not a, if he runs, a person to be messed with. I also agree The Rock, really, if he chose to win, would automatically get a lot of support because of how well loved he is, how at least his persona, I don't know the person specifically, I've never met the man, but seems like a good person. I also wouldn't sleep on either Bill Gates or Mark Cuban just on the sheer amount of money they have. Now, if you look at Bloomberg's campaign, how terrible it was, money doesn't mean anything. But the difference between Cuban, especially Cuban, and Bloomberg is Cuban's a very likable candidate, unlike Bloomberg, who's a literal, in the nicest way, he is a misogynist and just throws his money around. So kind of the Democratic version of Trump, basically, to say the least. So
Without the charisma.
without the charisma, exactly, Ashton.
The
But
same charisma of a soggy piece of white toast.
but
Um, I will say, to add on real quickly to that point about Bloomberg and his campaign, he still didn't do bad. Just the fact that he was getting, like, I would say middle to high teens in a 4 or 5 person race on Super Tuesday is somewhat kind of impressive, just by the fact that he does have the charisma of a soggy piece of white toast. His money bought
yeah,
him votes. It did.
money
And
isn't money isn't everything, Ashton. But money will get you your foot in the door, and your charisma is going to keep you there. And that's like this with these candidates, and that's why I think Bill Gates, Mark Cuban might have a shot. But then again, they're so slim. Mark Cuban's at 100-1 right now to win the presidency, so very very small percent chance. But Ashton, let's move on to the actual meat and potatoes, if you will, of these candidates. So there is 8 I put on this list from most favored to least favored that I think have a realistic shot of running and then winning primaries and such going to the presidency election. You have leading the Republican pack is the former South Carolina governor Nikki Haley, who also served in the Trump administration, with a 12-1% chance to win it. Number 2, You have former VP Mike Pence at 20 to 1. 3, the runner up of the Republican primary in 2016, Ted Cruz, 25 to 1. Good old Donald Trump's daughter at 4, Ivanka Trump, 33 to 1. Don Jr. at 5 with 50 to 1. The eye patch man himself, Dan Crenshaw, comes in at 66 to 1. And then you have 7 and 8 tied, Marco Rubio, 100 to 1. Mitt Romney, 100 to 1. I know there's some other ones in there that I did not add to the list. Like you have Tim Scott from South Carolina, 100 to 1. You have Mike Pompeo is actually at 50 to 1, even though I think he would just be
Andy,
absolutely terrible. And then Tom Cotton and Josh Haley or
Holly,
Holly are also in the list of Republican candidates.
Andy, what about Eric?
Oh no. Oh no. Dad, please love me.
um, yeah,
Actually,
Andy.
so you look at this list. Look at this list. Any of these candidates stand out to you? Do you think would have the best shot, the worst shot, just awful, just amazing? Who do you see from this list and some of the outliers I talked about that you are really intrigued about?
Yeah, Andy. Honestly, mm, let me start off with splitting the difference between people I personally prefer, like, and then the ones I think that have the best chance of winning. And they don't exactly necessarily align because on the Republican side, I don't like most of them. Let me be clear. And I'll get into that a little bit later if we talk about them individually. Uh, let me be clear. I don't think Mike Pence has a chance, even if Trump doesn't run. It doesn't matter if Trump endorses him or not. He has the same charisma as a wet blanket. He has more charisma than Mike Bloomberg, but that's not saying much. Because the fly that landed on him during that VP debate has more charisma than Mike Pence. So, on levels of charisma, Mike Pence isn't high. So I gotta generally say I don't think he's gonna go far. His VP status will get him through a few primaries, ending at second and third, but it won't be enough. I don't see the hardcore MAGA base going out and voting for Mike Pence for no reason. 4 years separated of Trump's term. If he gets endorsed by Trump, which I don't think he would be, but if he does, then I see him going up to like the 20-25%. But I don't see him being able to beat someone who I actually am surprised to find out that she's as high as she is on the betting network, because I've said already for 2 years, 3 years, with anyone else besides Donald Trump in the Republican primary, she's by far the most likely to become president after Donald Trump. Nikki Haley. I've said this, me and you are from South Carolina. I've grown up seeing her political career. She is one thing, and she's ruthless, and she's very, very smart politically. Um, I I used to really look up to her as a figure, not so much anymore. Um, because be honest, I thought she was pitch perfect with how she treated this administration for the first 2 years. I didn't fault her for going into it, and I didn't fault her for the way she acted during it and after she got out. She's one of the few cabinet members that not only attacked Trump during the primary, ended up going into his administration and actually getting a farewell by Trump with positive reviews. That's like unheard of for Trump. He doesn't ever do that for any people. And the fact that she pulled it off shows you how impressive she is just on political matter. Now, I think it reeks of not having any political backbone at all. She bent over backwards politically, saying, to kind of contort herself to him, at least privately. And then she started publicly doing it a year ago, and it's become even worse and worse during the reelection campaign. And, I guess she feels like she has to do it to have a chance in 2024. And apparently, other people are seeing the same thing I saw a few years ago, is that she knows what she's doing when it comes to the political aspect of it. Um, regardless of how I personally view her anymore. So I definitely think Nikki Haley, I would put her chances at like 65% at winning it. I think she'll be the front runner and she'll keep it for the entire time. And the fact that she's from South Carolina will help her greatly. Don Jr., he has the charisma of, let's say, I've already used wet blanket. Mm, his charisma is, let's say, soggy waffle. It's a little bit better than blanket, but still nothing like his father. His name alone will get him 30% in the Republican primary, but he'll be capped out at that because he can't expand his base much. And plus the other Trump sycophants will kind of cut into that, and that's the thing. I think whoever in this primary is moderate, at least for Republican terms, will end up being the person who kind of caves out 40%. This isn't going to be like 2016 where you have 15 moderates, or more like 5 or 6 really popular moderates and one Donald Trump. You're going to have 6 or 7 populists running against 1 or 2 moderates that are popular. And that would be Rubio and Haley. And Haley just is a lot smarter politically than Rubio, at least in my opinion. And I supported Rubio in 2015. So I'm being honest with that. I just think Nikki Haley is, I have a lot of respect for her when it comes to her politics. I think Democrats should not underestimate her. She is not a Donald Trump and she knows what she's doing. She was able to win in a state where no minority or female candidate has ever won after Reconstruction, and she was able to do it with amazing fashion and very smartly.
Yeah, so just kind of piggybacking on the Nikki Haley thing, not only did she win, as a minority, as a woman in a state like South Carolina, which, like, let's just call a spade, been very discriminating towards people of color and women. It's just call it what it is in this state. So, as much as I love it here and I love my state, we have problems like any other state does in this country. But she's able to win a state like that and be pretty much universally loved in this state, and that's very hard to do. And that's how good of a candidate she is. How good of we saw it here as a person. Again, I think me and you both agree the way she just kind of changed and catered to Trump the last few year or two is disheartening because we know the potential she has and what she did for our state, and we want to see that in the national level. So it kind of sucks to see her get away from that and be more, let's be like every other Republican. I'm hoping that that's just a political strategy. That's not actually what she believes, but you never really know with these people. But I do think, like you said, she's gonna be a force, probably the front runner right now. I liked Marco Rubio along with you did in 2015, but I just don't see him having a chance when in 2015 he couldn't even win his home state of Florida in the primaries. Like, you can't do that. I don't. I think Marco's going to be in there with a couple percentage votes, but he's just not the same candidate he was 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Doesn't have the same enthusiasm around him. And same kind of goes for Ted Cruz, but I think Ted Cruz is in a better position. But I really don't think, I know the odds have him at the third highest or near the third highest. I really don't see that with Ted Cruz. He's just so, I wouldn't say damaged, but he got so close in 2015, but Donald Trump just was better than him in the primaries. I don't see him having a chance this time. He might get third this time, but Mike Pence, obviously, we can throw that one out. I don't think he'll win more than a couple states in the South, and obviously his home state, but he's not a serious contender. I think you're going to have to pick either Ivanka or Don Jr. if their dad doesn't run in 2024. And even so, I think Ivanka has a better shot because she'll get more of the woman vote than Don Jr., but still isn't, like you said, Ashton, the 4 years removed from the MAGA movement. Do they still have the same enthusiasm? I don't believe so. You don't believe so. Also, you look at these younger guys that I mentioned kind of about the outliers. Tom Cotton is one of them, and the other one being Josh, Hawley. I think they have a bright future. Ashton, I think you can agree with that. They're going to be a force in a couple election cycles. I do not think it's their time right now. Can you agree with me on that one?
Yeah, and I think the problem is, and what I was trying to get to was that populist Trump lane is going to be filled to the brim with candidates. And I think you'll agree with me. The one candidate that kind of goes to the left or to the center of the party will have a big advantage. That's why I think outside shot, Mitt Romney has a better chance than almost everyone else on this list besides, I would say, Ivanka or Don Jr. I think he would have a better chance than Ted Cruz or Mike Pence just off of the shot that if he ran and Nikki Haley, let's say, goes very populist, she will be fighting for votes with Mike Pence and Ted Cruz and Mike Pompeo. Mitt Romney wouldn't be fighting for any votes in the middle or to the center left of the party. Now, will that be enough to win the primary? I doubt it, but I think he would have a better shot than Mike Pence or Ted Cruz in a crowded MAGA primary.
Yeah, Ashton, I was hesitant to speak about Mitt Romney, but I am glad that you brought him up. I think the problem with Mitt Romney is he's a very likable candidate. I personally like him. I know you personally like him. Um, but to be in a position where you're coming in running for a second time in this crowded field of, like you said, populist Trumpers, you know good and well the number one kind of attack point they're going to have is you can't even beat a Democrat when you're running for president. That's going to hurt him. I know the Democrat was one of the most famous, one of the best candidates of all time in Barack Obama. Very hard for anyone to ever beat him. You know, McCain couldn't do it, and he was well loved, and Romney couldn't do it, and he was, I wouldn't say well loved, but was respected, at least around the country. So I just think that damage of him losing and losing in the fashion he did just wasn't really a close election is going to hurt him and cause him to
Well,
lose it.
he could always bring up Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan lost his first presidential election. It happens. And, I'm not here saying Mitt Romney will win. I think he's a long shot. I think Nikki Haley, like I said, has 65% chance. I think Mitt Romney has a 15% chance, and everyone else is less than like 5%, maybe 5% for Mike Pence, and everyone else is like 4 or 3% in my rankings, in my head. But I just generally think he has a better shot than people are giving him credit just by the fact that he would be running in a lane that no one else is running in. Because a lot of Republicans that are moderates don't think they can win, so they won't run. You won't have maybe Larry Hogan will run, but I don't think he will. Charlie Baker won't run. So like who's the moderate candidate who Mitt Romney's gonna have to fight? Like the only candidate, if Nikki Haley moderates and goes to the left, she will win that primary decently easy. That's my opinion.
Yeah, Ashton, I will throw out one more name before we move on to our personal picks for who we want to see in the Republican primaries. That's Paul Ryan. Do you think Paul Ryan has any chance to run? Do you think he will run? And if he does, any chance?
He's an interesting one, but I think it's the same reason why other people like Charlie Baker and Larry Hogan won't run because they don't think they can win a primary because they haven't been efficiently Trumpy enough. And that's I think the reality of it. And Mitt Romney will have the best shot out of those non-Trumpy candidates, in my opinion. Unless if Nikki Haley moderates, then it's all mute.
I can agree with that, Ashton. I mean, Rand Paul is fine, but I don't think he'll run. So that's why I just don't have him as a serious contender in the Republican Party. But Ashton, let's move on to our personal. We can say we can do top five, top three, top two. It doesn't really matter. Just you give your personal favorites who you want to see run and win the Republican primary. Ashton, I'll let you start. Who do you have?
Who I think will win, I've said it, Nikki Haley. Who I would
Personal.
want
Who do you
to,
love personally? Yeah, want.
yeah, personally, has to be Mitt Romney, and then after Mitt Romney, it probably would end up being a half, or I'll split. I'll make it a tie and say Charlie Baker, Larry Hogan. I don't think either of them's gonna run. And then if I had to put a third, then I'll say Nikki Haley by default. But my you used to know me like 3 or 4 years ago. I was super high on Nikki Haley, like really really high on her. Um, like if I had to pick one person in the country to be president right then and there, I would have made her it. But now I'm a lot less. I sold a lot of stock on her. I thought she had a lot more core principles than she turned out having. She's been way more seeking political power, and I get it. That's politics. If you don't do that, you'll end up losing. It just to me, I think it's better to be honest and lose honest and win trading all your political soul for things that don't matter, at least in the long term. So, Nikki Haley has to be my third.
I'm actually gonna give you, I'll say top three, and then like point five, and like kind of get my third and fourth is like the same, kind of like you did with the tie there. But number one, I'm actually gonna go with Tim Scott. And we did not talk about Tim Scott in this video. It just didn't come up in this
Podcast.
podcast, but it just didn't come up. But I really like Tim Scott. I think he held on to some of his core principles while still supporting Trump in the Republican Party, and I think that's tough to do. I like him in the state of South Carolina, our senator, and that's, you can see the bias coming out there, but he's done a fantastic job for our state, and I think he is a force if he does run, but I don't think he will run in this election cycle. My number two is Nikki Haley. I know you don't like her. Well, not that you don't like her, but you've kind of soured on her due to her very much full force Trump support. I still really like her for the same reasons you liked her a few years ago, but not as much due to that reason. But I still want her to win more than I do other candidates in the Republican Party. And then my kind of third and like fourth, so kind of the same, would be either John Kasich or Mitt Romney. They're kind of in the same category of their country over party, very much so, and they're very respectable. Have not really sold their soul to Trump, but I don't think Kasich has a shot. If we're going to do a podcast in probably next week, so come back to that one where we're going to talk about who we think Biden's cabinet is going to be, and I think me and you both can agree. We think Kasich should be somewhere on that cabinet, or at least somewhere in the
He
White
will.
House.
He'll be in the
So
cabinet.
that might hurt his chances in the Republican primary to run. I don't know for sure. So I kind of have him tie with Romney, as in both those candidates, I would be 100% okay with winning the Republican primary and obviously the election at that point.
All right, Andy. Let's go ahead and move on to the Democrats, the incumbent party. We're gonna start off with Madam Vice President herself, Kamala Harris. Of course, she is number one with the sports betting odds at plus 300. Andrew Yang comes in at a surprising third. Bernie Sanders. Then there's Pete Buttigieg, Beto. Surprising for me, Michelle Obama at 7, Stacey Abrams, AOC is a little low at 9, Andrew Cuomo at 10, not surprising, Elizabeth Warren herself at 11, and then Mark Cuban at 12th. Andy, who kind of sh- uh, shocks you at their ranking, and how would you order those if you had to?
Now, if our listeners and viewers are picking up on it, we went from one to three there, and you're probably asking who's number two. That's Joe Biden, but we talked about him and Trump at the beginning of the video, so we kind of excluded them from this list. So that makes sense. Um, I don't. I can see this list. I know why Michelle Obama is so low. That's because they don't think she's gonna run. But if she ran, she would probably be number one or number two. If not, obviously number one, she will be that well liked and a woman, which gets so many, and a minority, which gets so many, boxes checked off for a successful primary. Ashton, I know you are kind of shocked to see AOC that low. I'm not. I just don't think. I mean, AOC is going to get her demographic, but she will not get a lot of the more widespread moderate base of the Democratic Party like Joe Biden was, like some of these other people are, like Pete Buttigieg was. So that's why she's so low. She's kind of Bernie Sanders, hooking up the notch to 15. I think Bernie's a little too high at 4. He's, I believe, 79 years old right now. Ashton, you can double check me on that one if you want, but he's for sure in his upper 70s. So I really don't think 4 years from now he's going to be the fourth highly likely candidate to win the Democratic presidency if it happens. Um, I think Pete Buttigieg is a good spot for him. I would probably put him up a little bit more. I would actually put him at like 3, above Andrew Yang, but
You were spot on at 79 for Bernie.
okay, cool, nice. But like I said, Buttigieg, I would have him higher than Yang. Yang would come in below him. I'm fine with Beto at that spot. Cuomo's a kind of mystery man. How well will he be liked? He's got problems. We'll see how how everyone loves his brother on CNN. But, and I agree with Warren being so low. She's just not, her time has been done. She tried and just couldn't crack that nut, if you will. Um, Ashton, what do you think? Who do you think is the one candidate that stands out here to really have a shot? I would say the two that would stand out for me to have the best shot at winning would be, not counting Joe Biden, of course, and this is going to sound really sad to Kamala, but I would give it to either Buttigieg, Yang, or obviously if Obama ran Obama.
So again, guys, we haven't talked about this, and I'm actually kind of happy and surprised that we almost perfectly align on this type of things. Because if Obama runs, she will be the Democratic nominee, and she will beat any Republican. I'm going to say that right now. She will beat any Republican in a landslide. Because unlike Biden, she will turn out African Americans to historic levels, I believe. And on top of that, be able to like even get moderates more than Biden did to vote for her. So I really, really expect her to do great if she ends up running. That's the $1 million question. Does she want to run? Will she run? I don't know. But if she does, she's definitely the favorite. And if she does not, I gotta say Pete Buttigieg, I think will be the nominee. Um, Kamala has a lot of issues. Her campaign was not only just terribly ran when you look at like how campaigns are ran, managed, stuff like that. Her messaging was everywhere, and she tried to do what Pete Buttigieg ended up doing a lot more better, and that was run to the super left. And when she realized that wasn't working, try to pivot. And she was never able to pivot. She wasn't really even able to pivot after she ran as VP with Biden. She couldn't pivot like that well, and she made a decent amount of mistakes, more than a VP should. So she's not a perfect politician. Her charisma isn't all the way there. And typically, I find her speeches all right. They're not great, they're not terrible, but she's very vanilla. And I don't mean that racially, but I mean, she's just vanilla in the sense of a
Oh man.
politician. And um, I just am Pete Buttigieg. I'm really high on him, not because I necessarily like everything he stands for, but he's so much charisma and he's so smart, and like he earned the nickname Slayer Pete because he is very impressive when he goes onto hostile environments, and he's able to rattle off a theme and his positions with crystal accuracy into the head of his opponents. And it's just amazing to watch. And he ran a great campaign too. You don't go from being a mayor to winning the first caucus without knowing what you're doing. And I just think he has a lot more advantages than Kamala being VP does. And to me, if Kamala wants to win, she doesn't just have to moderate and not be known as the liberal from California, but she has to work on her speaking. She has to work on her charisma and kind of getting it and seem a little bit less stiff and fake. And I'm not saying that's because she's a woman. I don't say those things about Nikki Haley at all. She's a great speaker and she has a lot of charisma and she knows how to get it out. And I like Kamala more now than I do Nikki Haley if you want to compare the two. But in general, I think Kamala has a charisma problem and she's not great at making speeches necessarily. It's like her DNC speech that's hard to compare, but it could have been better. You don't want to overshadow your nominee, but it still could have been a little bit better. That's my views, Andy.
I will give Harris some credit. I think her I want to say acceptance speech for VP once they were projected the winner. Was it last Saturday? A week ago now. Man, it feels like a year ago, whichever day that was. The Saturday after Election Day, Ashton. You know which one I'm talking about. But I think her speech there was very, very well. I think it was very articulate. I think it was speaking to both sides of the aisle. I think she did pretty well for what she had for being not the focal point of the night. I think she did very, very well. I don't. It's still not an amazing speech, but it is her best so far. A candidate that you didn't touch on in your kind of deep dive, Andrew Yang. I think he's very interesting. Him being the last minority standing shows something when he was unknown beforehand. I mean, he beat out Kamala Harris. He beat out Cory Booker. He beat out all the. I guess Tulsi Gabbard would be considered. She's Hawaiian, so she's a minority as well there. But it just goes. Well, technically, Tulsi did last longer, but she really wasn't, a threat at all. But Yang being the last prominent minority standing, and being an Asian American, which you don't see a lot of those in politics for the sad truth of it, he did very well. I think he's very in tune with the younger generation. He knows how to use technology to his advantage, the marketability side that kind of got Donald Trump elected in 2016. I don't think he will win it, but I think he will be still a pretty good force in the party. I think he could be a good cabinet member, if not this time in 4 years from now. Um, Beto really is kind of that one kind of one hit wonder candidate, in my opinion. Kind of you look at the Texas race in the Senate back a couple years ago when he almost beat Ted Cruz in Texas. I think he's kind of the one hit wonder, flash in the pan kind of guy, and you kind of saw that when he came to the election. Even though he was trying to speak in Spanish for the majority of his debates, that didn't go over well, and he was out pretty much virtually the first.
I
Stacey,
will quickly comment on two of the people you talked about. I'll quickly comment on Yang. I respect Yang a lot. He did a lot better than I expected. Very smart guy, the smartest candidate on that stage, but he needs to work on his speaking ability and he has to project charisma. If he had the charisma on top of everything else, his background and his intelligence, he would be by far a lot better situated, but people sadly don't vote on how smart you are for president. They vote whether or not they feel connected to you. And I feel like he does energize certain parts, but he doesn't connect to older people without that charisma and without that ability to speak to the older generation. And like it or not, the older generation votes more. So that's one of those things that I think he needs to work on if he wants to have a little bit more success in the primary. Um, the other ones, Beto, you like you said, one hit wonder. I felt like his mistake was not running to the center sooner. Again, a lot of these candidates made the same mistakes, and by the time they knew what to do, only one of them was going to be capable of pulling off a win, and that ended up being Pete Buttigieg, to his credit. But they had to do it sooner, and I was saying that then, and they didn't, and they ended up all losing because of it.
yeah, and you also see how this list there is no Cory Booker, as he kind of also was. The sad was he had his shot, he didn't really get far. He really wasn't as likable as we
All
thought he
the
was.
housewives were scared of him, Andy.
Stacey Abrams is interesting, but I just don't think she's gonna have the widespread approval. I mean, was very instrumental in flipping Georgia to Biden and the Democrats, but I just don't think she's going to be a widespread approval candidate for the Democratic Party. I mean, that's not a knock on her. It's not because she's a woman. It's just because I just don't see her as she's very to more of the left, kind of like same kind of thing AOC is, not as bad as AOC. That's why she's a little bit better odds of winning, and I agree with that. But kind of just not the same widespread approval. I think AOC will get a lot of the young votes, a lot of the minority votes, but like you said, Ashton, she's going to get virtually none of the older and moderate votes, which is the majority of who's going to be voting. That's going to hurt her. Cuomo, I honestly have no clue how he could do. I don't think he's got a real chance, but hey, he would, to me, kind of feels like he could be that Pete Buttigieg candidate where he's not going to win, but might win. Obviously, he'll win New York, but he might win a primary or two and be surprising in that third or second spot. Warren's done. She has no real shot. When she's lied a lot about the whole her being more Native American than she thought. She likes to talk about policy, but no one has any connection with her. She feels kind of like a robot coming up there. Here's what I'm gonna do, point by point by point. Very boring sometimes to listen to. And Mark Cuban, we talked about him in the oddballs. If he runs, he might get some support, but I
Dwayne
don't think so.
Johnson, I would say would have a real shot too.
Yeah, Dwayne Johnson would. Again, he would be putting, he's a 25-1 kind of, so he would be in the fifth or sixth spot in his odds. And then Bernie, I know we didn't touch on him, but we did a little bit. But like I said, he's too old. He shouldn't run. I don't think he will. But Ashton, we kind of have. I think me and you can both agree that Pete Buttigieg is in a very good position to kind of be the one who can win this thing. Obviously, if Michelle Obama doesn't run, we can debate other people, but let's say for simplistic sake, we're gonna have Buttigieg as our number one when it comes to our predictability of who's gonna win. But in your personal, who do you want to represent the Democratic Party? And if in return that said person won the presidency, who would you want to see as that Democratic candidate? You
Um,
can give me a list of 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. Just give me at least 2 or 3.
okay, I'll give you two. Unrealistically, I would like Michelle Obama. I'm very impressed, not just by her natural speaking ability, but also her views. She's been very moderate. I've always had a positive view of her. Um, I wasn't the biggest fan of her husband's presidency, but I always had a favorable view of her, and I feel like she's everything Hillary Clinton wasn't, in just terms of like likability and
and not
ability to
and not
speak.
being corrupt. Just
Yeah, and just being able to speak to common day people, and something about her just it it doesn't rub me the wrong way like Hillary did. And realistically, I guess right now, either I guess I'll give three. I would say Pete Buttigieg. He's gonna get probably like Secretary of Veteran Affairs. He'll do a great job at it, and it's I don't care about his sexuality at all. That's his business, and I really think his career and charisma is good, and he would be a really tough candidate to run against for Republicans. And he would be very moderate and smart about the way he would handle the country. So that's my top two. And then on third, I would say Tammy Duckworth. I still have a lot of respect for her. She has a great background, a lot of history, got shot down in a Black Hawk, lost her legs. I still think she would have been the better pick for VP for Biden. I really think that. Um, she has better. I would say she has the same charisma as Kamala Harris, but I think she has more growth there. Just in general, those are my three.
honestly, Ashton, I really only have 2. I mean, I guess I could throw Dwayne Johnson in there to be like, I would be okay with him. So that's like my third, I guess. But
I like
my
him
number one
too.
and number two, my number one and my number two really isn't a shock if you've listened to any of our podcast or if you follow or subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, the Mr. R Show. You would know I am very high on this guy. And my number one is Andrew Yang. I really love him as a candidate. I loved him in 2019, sorry, Democratic primaries. I know we did when we did our reaction to each of the debates, each of the election results. I was huge on Yang. I said he was my guy. I don't think he's gonna win it, but I think he's very he will bring that youth, that new wave of energy into this country that we desperately need, that we need to get away from these lifelong politicians that don't know how to run the country, or even people like Donald Trump. And I know people are like, well, Yang's a businessman. How's he different? I think he's a lot more grounded. I think he's smart enough to get people in his cabinet or in his administration that will be very, very well respected, very well intelligent in the things that we need. But that's a long shot. And then my number two, which really is more realistic, and I kind of agree with you, Ashton, Pete Buttigieg. I would be very happy if he became the Democratic nominee, and if he won, I would not be disappointed in a Buttigieg presidency. He's also that young guy. He was a mayor and a veteran. Those are two things that are really good because being a mayor lets you get those local, you know how these issues locally affect people. You're a lot more people hands on. I think he will be good for equality in this country. Like, again, sexuality should not always play a role. That shouldn't stop you from being um, any kind of government role in this country, but sometimes it does, depending on where you live and who you are, and that happens. But I think Buttigieg would be great. Like I said, the veteran will get him a lot of votes there, and I think he's a good candidate. So it would be Yang, Buttigieg, and I guess Dwayne Johnson if I had to throw in a third.
Do you have any crazy ones to throw out there?
I do, Ashton. I actually have one little Democratic candidate that we did not talk about. That's kind of a crazy scenario and would kind of throw a wrench in stuff. And that is
Mm-hmm.
Meghan Markle. What do you think about her? The Duchess of Sussex. Any kind of, I doubt, like on the scale of 0 to 100 on the chances she'll win, it's like a 0.25. But she's on the list of odds at a 33 to 1. So that's higher than Bernie is, higher than Beto is. What do you think of her, Ashton? Any real, if she did run, assuming she did, does she have a chance?
I honestly, I used to like your show Suits. I mean, politically, I don't have an opinion of her because I haven't seen her in a political setting, but to me, I think she would be more Kanye West than Donald Trump.
It all depends, I guess, on how she speaks. I mean, she's gonna automatically get tons of those housewives votes, because and all the teenage votes and the women vote because and some of the men vote, but for some reason, the Americans like us, not me specifically or you specifically, but Americans in general, have a fascination for the royal family and the English style like that. So she'll get automatically some votes. I don't take her seriously, but you never know because we had a president who was in a reality TV show called The Apprentice. So anything could happen.
Hmm.
But all right, guys, thank you for joining us on a very fun episode of the Political Perch Podcast as we went through all of the candidates, Republican, Democrat, and the oddballs. Gave you the odds, gave you our personal choices. We're excited to see that. I know it's 4 years away. Never too early to start planning, Ashton. We're happy the election cycle is over because we get to do more fun things like that instead of having to constantly react almost every week to a Donald Trump tweet or action. But we'll be back again next week. I think that will be our cabinet video where we're going to predict and pick Biden's cabinet because it's coming soon. But guys, thank you for listening. Hit that like, rate, whatever you're listening on, YouTube or Apple Podcast or Google Play, wherever you're listening. Hit that like button, give us a rating. It really does help a lot. Stay safe out there, guys, and we'll see you next week on the Political Perch Podcast.